Thanks for having me. It's nice to see you. Yeah, no, nice to see you, mate. Yeah, I've just bought a boat. Oh yeah? Yeah, big one. Bigger than this. Okay. I mean, it's at least 16 foot wide. Yeah. 80 foot long. Really? Yeah, and I've gone up as well, yeah. Double decker. Full size sofa, massive king size bed. Okay. Fully fitted kitchen, you've got a kettle, microwave, dishwasher. It's got a full sized walk-in fridge. Walk-in? Yeah. I've got a jacuzzi on there. Jacuzzi? Yeah, it's lovely. Press a button. Yeah. It's really nice. I sold the house. All the money from the house has gone into this boat. Survey? No, don't need it. Nothing's ever going to go wrong. I've spent so much money on this boat. I know that it is going to be the best, most reliable, incredible boat, and I just know that I'll never regret a single decision that I've made about buying this boat. And that's what gives me peace of mind. The idea of downsizing from a house to a narrowboat has had a bit of a resurgence recently, and there's a load of information on the internet about which is the best boat to buy, what to look out for, what engine to get, what is a bow, what is a stern, what is the purpose of a tumble home, other than to look sexy of course. But despite all of this useful information, there's still a lot of mystery that surrounds these big metal beasts that spend most of their life half submerged in water. So to help kind of demystify some of that, here's my 6 mistakes that I think a lot of people make going from a house to a narrowboat. And although I've never had a house, I've made all of these mistakes. Who are you talking to? Mind your own business. Mistake number 1. Bigger isn't always better. The first realisation that anybody comes to when they think about downsizing is that the size that they're downsizing to might actually be quite small. In the UK, the average house size is about 818 square foot or 76 square metres. So if you move from that into a narrowboat, you can expect your personal space to shrink to just over a quarter of that size. Now, there's a lot of advantages to living in such a small space. Quick to heat, quick to tidy, and generally there's the satisfying feeling that all your stuff can be contained into such a neat little package. But the thought of cramming your whole life into something the size of the average UK garage can be quite disconcerting to some people, and the first thing they'll try and do is tinker with the dimensions of the classic English narrowboat to try and find a little bit more of that precious interior space. And thus, the weird boats are born. Boats with square sterns, boats with no gunnels, boats with the well deck being covered over to form an extra little bit of cabin space. These boats are an abomination and should never be allowed to sully the waters of our historic canal system. Of course I'm joking. These boats, although they are untraditional, are all part of the rich tapestry of what makes canal life so interesting. The real problem with the bigger equals better approach is when it's applied to the systems and the appliances inside the boat. Electrical systems are a classic victim of the bigger equals better brigade, mostly because it's just so hard to figure out how much electrical energy you think you're going to need in day-to-day life. How much does a toaster take? How much does a hairdryer take? Or what about a microwave? Or what about a television? Working all this kind of stuff out is a little bit of a dark art, and usually the solution is to forget all that and just go big. The problem is that big battery banks and big inverters and stuff like that come with issues. If a battery bank isn't charged regularly enough, it can just fail completely. Big inverters use up more electrical energy just being switched on. Get me some lunch! So there's issues there. The way I made this mistake was with the water pump. I wanted a powerful shower. I bought a water pump with a pressure rating that was way too high for such a small system, and although the pipes miraculously held together under the punishment, the sensor that controlled the pressure on the pump didn't. I think it was sick and tired of a life of never being able to fully let itself fly, and in an act of heroic self-expression, it set fire to itself, melted its little plastic casing, and rendered the pump completely useless. It was a sad day that taught me that bigger isn't always better, and that you're better off working out what you actually need and sizing things appropriately. One final word on this is, if in doubt, go without. There's two sides to the equation when it comes to downsizing. On the one side you've got all the limited space and the limited resource that you're trying to do your best with, but on the other side of the equation, I think you'll surprise yourself with how adaptable you are. Things you thought of as deal breakers will just fade into irrelevance once you've emptied the 100th bucket of your own wee and poo down an open communal toilet. And before you know it, it'll have been years before you had the fridge turned on. You'll be making yourself a cup of tea with water that's nowhere near boiling, and you'll look back and think, remember when I thought I needed electricity to be happy? Mistake number 2. All that glitters ain't gold. There's very little common sense involved in deciding to cash it all in and go and live on a narrowboat. It's not on many top investments lists. It's not whispered in very many board meetings. But too much thinking with your head can stand in the way of a decision that's best made with your heart. And what's not to love about a life on the water? You've got the nature right outside, you've got the ducks, the bird song, and of course, the boats themselves. Often brightly coloured and charmingly narrow, these historic beauties now come with a range of modern conveniences that has to be seen to be believed. Stainless steel worktops, swish coffee machine, fancy spouted kettle, quickly spinning cake maker. With all this luxury inside, you'll scarcely believe that just below the floor, millimetres of possibly untreated steel are rusting away as we speak. Just say yes and start your new carefree life today. Oh, by the way, the engine doesn't work. Us boaters are perhaps a little susceptible to being swept up in a romantic idea. It's probably why we're here in the first place. But when it comes to deciding which boat to buy, it's always worth keeping one foot on the ground, even if that does seem a bit boring. Hull surveys are often a good idea because somebody who actually knows what they're talking about is going to come and check the thickness and the condition of the hull and advise you on any steel work that might need doing. Of course, all of this is the exact opposite of what Jo and I did when we bought this boat, Holly, 4 years ago. We stood in a pile of mouldy old wood in a couple of inches of water, in a boat with an engine that doesn't even work, a hull that we knew nothing about, and we said, we'll take her. Looking back, that was possibly a little reckless. It's all turned out alright so far, but yeah, probably wouldn't advise it. Mistake number 3. I know what I'm doing. Yes, I'm doing a lot of the fit out myself, but I know what I'm doing. Yeah, not like you when you did this. Yeah, I saw that. That was a bit embarrassing, wasn't it? No, but I know what I'm doing. I've done a lot of houses, so I'm just going to do everything the same. Electrics, plumbing, I can do it all. The only thing I'm struggling with is my cabinets. I can't get anything level. The trouble is with boats is that they are actually quite different from houses, and there's a few specific regulations that relate to the boat fit out, so if that is something you're thinking of doing yourself, it's worth getting to know what they are. But here's just a few quick little pointers. Household cable, you can't use it on boats because of engine vibration. It's a killer and it breaks the copper in regular household cable. Instead, you have to use this stuff. It's more flexible, it's got more copper strands in it, and that helps defend it against engine vibration. For similar reasons, soldered joints on copper pipes are also a bit of a mistake on boats because they shake loose and then start leaking. And finally, spirit levels. They just don't really work on boats because boats are supposed to be wonky. Bow thrusters. Do we really need them? Every once and again on the canal, I'll come across somebody who's gotten themselves into a bit of a pickle on a boat as they're going along, and I'll hear the unmistakable whinnying of a bow thruster as they're trying to get themselves out of trouble, and I'll see the disappointment on their face as they realise that the bow thruster isn't quite the effective option that they thought it was going to be. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, a bow thruster is basically a propeller that sits on the front of the boat and pushes the boat from side to side. They help with manoeuvrability. Big ships have bow thrusters because the captain can't just stick his leg out and push against something if he's stuck. Narrowboats, on the other hand, are relatively small and easy to handle, and there's no shame, if you do get yourself in a muddle, of abandoning the tiller and just going and poling or pushing off whatever you're stuck on. But bow thrusters, I think, don't help. But the real reason why I think they belong on this list, they break. For every one working bow thruster out there, I reckon there's probably about 10 that are just completely broken. And even when they do work, they swish around in this little metal tube at the front of your boat and pull water from side to side. But it's not just water they're pulling through, it's grit, whatever else is suspended in the canal, effectively sand blasting the inside of your hull, and that makes a weak point in it, obviously, and causes problems later on. Basically, I know that I'm probably going to get a lot of grief in the comments section from people who absolutely love bow thrusters, but I think they're much more trouble than they're worth, and I do think they belong on this list. Mistake number 5. Welcome to the margin. The real world moves fast. Fast cars, trains, connections via satellite, a city with its eyes wide open, bright lights firing like neurons in the brain of a TikTok addicted teen moving at 100 miles an hour in the backseat of a self-driving SUV. The canals, on the other hand, move slow. And it makes sense because they're nearly 300 years old and they've had a hard life. They've carried millions of tons of cargo, aided in the Industrial Revolution, built towns, fought in wars, got bombed, went out of business, and then miraculously got reopened in the 50s and 60s. Quite frankly, it's amazing they're still standing. Canal and River Trust are the people that are in charge of most of the canal network, and they get a lot of interest from boaters, but they also get a lot of interest from other people. Conservationists, ecologists, investors, land developers, landowners, residential neighbours, cyclists, dog walkers, historians, enthusiasts, anoraks and gongoozlers, just to name a few. And they've got to keep everybody happy because although the canals were originally built just for boaters, the reason they're here today is because they're being enjoyed by everyone. Even stuff like lock gates and bridges, infrastructural stuff that you'd think only boaters are bothered about, many of them are actually listed historic structures, and so they can't be fixed just in the easiest way. They've got to be maintained using traditional methods. So bridges, for example, have to be lime and mortared, and there's only one place in the whole country that can still make lock gates in the traditional way out of oak. All this inconvenience kind of adds to the charm of the place, but it can come as a bit of a shock to somebody who's just stepped out of their house and found themselves in this strange old world.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
The mistake can be to expect too much from a knackered old canal system that's just doing its best to keep the show going.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain!
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
Mistake number 6. Listening too much. People can have a lot of advice when it comes to boats. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's questionable, often it's contradictory, overall it can be confusing. In the end, your decision with your boat is a personal one. Try not to listen too much to marinas or boat brokers or people who say always get a survey or people who say never get a survey, and definitely don't listen to people who make videos about lists of advice and then put them up on YouTube. Those guys never know what they're talking about. So there you have it. There's my 6 mistakes that I think people often make going from a house to a narrowboat. I hope you liked it. See you next week. Big thanks to the Petron crew. Thanks for watching. Bye!